Welcome, everybody, to another NPCs Weekly News Roundup. We are live, and of course, it is May 14th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we'll be talking about the Xbox outage and the discussions it brought out about the DRM that Microsoft has run into with plagues, especially going back to the Xbox One. We're going to talk more about the discussions that have revolved around that. We'll also be talking about Blizzard's announcement of an internal tool called the Diversity Tool, or the Character Diversity Tool, and why it exists. Plus, they've also responded to some of the criticism with it, too. We'll get into that as well. Also, of course, EA and FIFA have decided to part ways after 23 different games have been released under the EA and FIFA name. What's that going to mean for soccer/football games going into the future? Well, guess what? We're going to talk about that and more on today's Weekly News Roundup. We're going to roll our intro first and then get things started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another NPCs Weekly News Roundup for the week of November 20th, 2020. It is Friday. It is, where's my date? It's September 18th. 2020 here to our first story, and this is actually breaking news for all of us right now here too. Figured this is a kind of a big one to cover, of course, with who it is. Joined via Discord by Kyle because we're in the midst of a pandemic still, and of course everything is all kinds of crazy. So this thing is a chocker. I mean,
yeah, it's a beast.
It's huge. Doing that we had the Resident Evil stuff, that they were successful with Castlevania. Welcome to another NPC's Weekly News Roundup. And it's the news time. I am joined, of course, by Kyle via Discord. Kyle, hello.
What's up?
Man. And just like that, we're live, we're here, we are ready to talk about the news. Again, everybody, welcome. It is the NPC's Weekly News Roundup for May 14th, 2022. My name is Travis, and of course, via Discord over there next to me is Kyle. Kyle, hello.
What's up?
Dude, I still never know what's up anymore with video game stuff, with anything anymore. We are a video game channel. We talk video game news, we do our podcast stuff with discussing things, and there are still some things that kind of come out and not surprise me, but also surprise me in the world of games. And I think a couple of our stories this week kind of just hit, I don't know, just about everything in that category. What do you think?
For the most part, I mean, some of the stuff I could have seen coming, I think.
maybe so. Maybe I'm just so ingrained in everything else.
At least one of the major stories.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's hop into that major story here, like the big story from this week here. Let's talk about that. And that is, actually, that was not the first story I wanted to do there. But you know what? We'll actually go ahead and get into that one first. This is actually about the Xbox DRM outage. We'll get into the other one here. I forgot I had the story subtitles here below us. That way when people join in and that to see what we're talking about, I have them there below. And I forgot I flipped story 2 and 1 around because we talked about the Xbox outage as it was happening live last week. And so I forgot to flip those story subtitles around in OBS. So that's my bad. But let's anyway.
Either of those stories I saw coming, honestly.
Yeah. So
especially the one we were going to talk about. But let's go ahead and head into this one with the DRM. Yeah. Because this is kind of an interesting one that it's happened to Xbox right after Sony had its issue with some of the Vita titles. And PS4 titles just mysteriously setting their dates back to 1969 and doing all sorts of weird stuff and not allowing players to access games that they had already purchased.
That is no joke. So the outage itself with Xbox, just as a recap for everybody, is this was over the course of several days last weekend, starting around Thursday or Friday last weekend, where core services for the Xbox environment affecting consoles, the cloud streaming, and of course Xbox on PC were all experiencing major problems. Titles that you purchased, you wouldn't be able to necessarily play on your console or on your PC. You wouldn't be able to connect to cloud streaming. And if you're a person who uses your Xbox as your core media device in your house, like for streaming content, say from like Disney Plus, Hulu, Netflix, all of those services were also impacted as well. Well, turns out, like you were talking there, Kyle, is that it appears to be an issue with the DRM. And this is something that's funny enough just to think about because Microsoft suffered greatly at the hands of the tech community, of reviewers, of gamers alike about like all of this DRM stuff with Xbox One back when it was announced for back in 2012, 2013. And now here we are, still suffering at the hands of it almost a decade later, that people couldn't play it just because games you still purchase and download locally require check-in with Xbox services. What do you think about that?
Yeah, on an entirely different generation, nonetheless. And actually, I was experiencing some of the issues on PC trying to play Trek to Yomi. It was telling me that my title wasn't ready yet, or I didn't have the ownership to play the title, even though it was a Game Pass title. Um, the whole spiel. Um, I don't know. This is it's a little ridiculous that it happened so quickly after the Sony thing. It kind of makes me wonder if it's a deeper issue than just at the system level. Maybe it's down to the publisher level.
Maybe.
It's hard to say. It could be something that they hard coded in, but it's happening on a variety of different titles, including new titles. And with Xbox, it seemed to encompass more than just select titles. It was, system wide. So it was almost like a switch got flipped, or someone tripped over a cable in the server room, and whoop, there it goes.
Yeah, they tripped over a cable to the server that gives the DRM stuff out there, does the single check-in.
Right.
They had their own Johnny from Airplane, and they're pulling plugs. So,
but
go ahead.
On the other hand, though, this is a major issue. I mean, we talked about previously, like Steam. It has to do a check-in every 30 days for some games, and I imagine it's different if you've got a ton of games installed. It does it at different times, sure, maybe. Who knows? Maybe it does it at the first of every month, or the first login it has each month for all your games. But there should be some sort of fail-safe that this shouldn't be an issue. People should have had at least some playtime available to them, or at least the games that they, had downloaded, had purchased. It should have been logged in the system properly that they had access to play those games, even in an offline state. So this is kind of a major, major issue.
Yeah, I agree that this is a big problem here. And so where this issue really sits with is that, like you are right, that other publishers, other platforms have figured out the whole offline play thing, because granted, yes, we live in a connected world, and yes, even with those connections that we have, people have found a way to bypass DRM to break a game, so that way it can be released out there and people can play it without any sort of worry of being locked out by somebody, or at least potentially, so for them to actually have some of this stuff still in place and have not actually figured out the back end side to allow for that sort of like time period is very weird, especially the fact that a lot of even though the games do install on the storage itself of the consoles, the problem though is that there are other secure parts of the console storage that you can't get to. They are partitioned off, and I don't think I've seen anybody come out and say that they've broken those encrypted partitions yet to get at anything that actually makes the newer consoles tick. So
right.
It is an interesting thing to see, especially with all of the chaos that we've seen out there in the world over the last few years, with like Denuvo as a big example when it comes to DRM.
Right.
So how Microsoft hasn't really figured out a lot of this localized stuff is a little bizarre. But I got an interesting thing here I want to bring up from the article that we're referencing here from videogameschronicle.com, where they say here is, according to Does It Play, a Twitter account dedicated to testing commercial releases to ensure they work entirely internet free. The majority of Xbox games require an online check before they'll boot. And then the account said, they absolutely do not have them on PlayStation or Switch. Trust us, we've tested them. They also added, if the PlayStation servers go down tomorrow permanently, every single player game you own will work offline almost permanently, provided consoles working in the account was linked. There are a tiny subset of titles that will not. Xbox needs to fix their DRM problems. Hand-waving won't help. Nobody wins, especially Xbox fans, when all the catalog eventually becomes inaccessible. And that is a big point there to really consider, because we've talked about this previously with uh, I can't remember exactly which podcast episode we talked about this. Maybe it was even another news episode too. But we talked about those who still live in areas where they are data limited, where maybe their internet speeds are capped to a certain point or their internet usage for a month is capped to a certain point. And yes, that stuff still exists in the 21st century. That stuff still exists in 2022, unfortunately. That's a big problem, especially for a lot of those behind the scenes check-ins. Yes, it only does it once when you boot up the game, but when you take into account everything else that you're doing, though, too, if you're on something that's rate limited and usage limited, you've got to really make sure you can save whatever you can. And by those behind the scenes check-ins happening, it's doing a disservice to customers. There's ways to do it. There's ways to handle it. I mean, hell, Microsoft even requires Windows 11 to be installed properly on systems that use the TPM chip built into the CPU, the Trusted Protection Module, I think is what it is. And that's
platform module.
Thank you. Yeah, Trusted Platform Module. Thank you. That's one of those things that you would think, why doesn't the Xbox have? That right there is basically DRM, so to speak. Why is that not already in the Xbox Series consoles? And why is it that there aren't alternatives for those systems that don't have TPM built into them? Like maybe my PC doesn't have it built in right now, and for cloud streaming, there's really nothing DRM-wise you're actually breaking. You're signed into your account and you're streaming the game. You've already authenticated. You can't download the game through your phone to pirate it anywhere else. So as a consumer, I see it as just like, why have they not figured that out?
Well, and see, there's certain games I can understand, needing a check-in. Well, for one, there's a reason that you have the ability to set an Xbox as your home console. So once a game is downloaded, it shouldn't have to check over and over and over if you can play the game. It should be allowed to be played on that console regardless. That's kind of a starting point. But beyond that, like Game Pass games and stuff, beyond having the set expiration date, or an expiration date that could get extended out by Microsoft or, the publisher of whoever allowed them to put out the game, there could be, an access check-in time. So, you have to check in so often, like every 30 days or whatever. Just a quick login that, and then you'd be able to play it offline for 30 days. But the next time you log in, even if you're not playing the game, it would start the timer all over again because it's already checked and managed that DRM for you. That should be something that happens in the background. DRM is very, very small in comparison, to other bits of data in the whole scheme of things. But, and on top of that, there's only so many people that are going to even try and run scripts to bypass all that, or, especially on a console. It's a pain in the ass. No one wants to do it. So how much do you really have to worry about people cheating to try and get a game for longer or a game that's not theirs any longer?
No, and those are very excellent points. I think you really hit that just right, because I want to circle back to like what you said there about like what the DRM here at least is that it's a check-in to Microsoft's servers to be able to go ahead and validate. So yes, small amount of data. The DRM itself isn't necessarily game breaking, at least, other outside of these circumstances, like it is with Denuvo, because I made mention of that. And for a lot of people who may not know, Denuvo's DRM is baked into the underlying engine of these games. And people have noticed that when Denuvo is in use and running, even though it gets broken like day one, and it still somehow gets picked up and used for these games, which is still unexplainable. The performance hit, though, with Denuvo actually running on there was actually so noticeable that when it dropped, when the developer, I think it was like Doom Eternal, was a good example, is that when they dropped Denuvo, they actually saw a performance increase of 15 to 25%. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it was at least that's what sounds right in my head from when those stories came out. But they saw such a massive increase in those numbers for when
very
that
similar
DRM
to
was
Resident
there.
Evil Village.
Yeah, exactly. Is that by removing all of that, you saw these massive performance gains, it's like, well, what is the DRM actually doing in the background? Is it actively scanning my drives? Is it actively scanning memory? Is it actively scanning
constantly
something else?
communicating?
Yeah, it's the amount of stuff that it's eating up is just insane. It almost seems more like not necessarily even DRM. It feels more like a data pipeline for those companies to actually start scraping up as much data as they can, not to see if we're playing the game legally or we're playing a hacked version of the game. It's more like trying to pull in all this telemetry that just there's better ways to do it. Mm-hmm. So, I'm glad that things are fixed. We haven't seen any issues, at least since this has happened. And they said that there was an update coming out that should address these issues going forward in the future. So whether or not they are maybe doing a timer for offline games as they relate to, the actual check-ins like Steam does, or if they are maybe putting something internally that's going to handle the DRM, we don't know what that's going to be yet. But it sounds like it could very well be close, and we just have to see what comes our way, whether it's in the Xbox app on our PCs or on our on my Series X console. We'll have to see what type of update it potentially gets, and then any change notes
and this is
we'll talk about later.
Yeah, and it's going to be increasingly important when there's a rumor that the Series S might be getting a external disk drive, and there might be potentially the ability to go in, trade your disk for a digital code, so it can go both ways now. So that DRM, getting that whole thing solved, it's becoming like a pertinent issue now.
Yeah, especially because the whole idea of turning your physical disk into something that's digital with that type of code, again, we're now seeing echoes back to the announcement of the Xbox One back in 2012, 2013. It really is like it's deja vu with a lot of this. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and carry on here to what was supposed to be the first story, but is definitely still not any less than what we just talked about here, and that is that Bethesda has announced the delay of Starfield and Redfall to 2023. So they dropped an announcement on their Twitter page over on, I believe it was the 12th. They announced here saying, we've made the decision to delay the launches of Redfall and Starfield to the first half of 2023. The teams at Arcane Austin for Redfall and Bethesda Game Studios, who are handling Starfield, have incredible ambitions for their games, and we want to ensure that you receive the best, most polished versions of them. We want to thank everyone for their excitement for Redfall and Starfield. That energy is a huge part of what inspires all of us every day and drives our own excitement for what we are creating. We can't wait to share our first deep dive into the gameplay for both Redfall and Starfield soon. Thank you for your support. Now, it's weird. It's really interesting that they announce a delay only a month away from the Xbox Bethesda showcase that's happening mid-June, where they're supposed to be showing off a lot more about Starfield, which it sounds like we're still going to get a lot about Starfield. But there's two things about this, Kyle, that looking at the article here that Polygon wrote up about this, that really bring things up is that, one, it's probably a good thing that they did delay. I don't know. I don't remember what Redfall is supposed to be. You have to forgive me for that one, but
that one's the it seems to be a Left 4 Dead style vampire game. So you're a group of survivors in a vampire apocalypse or something like that.
That sounds vaguely familiar now. Okay. Just because
they
Blood
had,
Hunt's
weird gangly vampires or something.
Yeah, I think Blood Hunt might have thrown me off a little bit too with their whatever they're doing with their stuff too. But so a lot of people, of course, are seeing like with the delays of Redfall and Starfield that they don't want a repeat of Cyberpunk, where the dev team is really voicing their concerns about the deadlines that are coming up, given that they're planning for a holiday season release for this year. So it sounds like there was a lot of emphasis on what had happened with Cyberpunk, and the heads of the studios really took that to heart and were like, okay, how much more time do you guys need? What assistance can we provide? Because Microsoft has just been bringing in all these different studios to make all these different things, and of course you don't want to ruin any sort of potential big IP, especially when it comes to like Starfield, for example. But this is where the second thing comes in, and the article makes a great point about this, is that because now that Redfall and Starfield have been pushed to 2023, there will be no official or at least significant releases. This is from the article from Polygon. This leaves Xbox without any significant releases from its internal studios scheduled for 2022. Fans are naturally not happy because last year Microsoft promised it would bring at least one first-party game every quarter to Game Pass. And Phil Spencer decided to comment after the announcement about Starfield and Redfall, saying, "These decisions are hard on teams making the games and our fans. While I fully support giving teams time to release these great games when they are ready, we hear the feedback. Delivering quality and consistency as expected, we will continue to work to better meet those expectations." Kyle, given that we are in a weird situation right now where we have the upcoming PS Plus Premium, Supreme, Extra Large, Double Size, whatever you want to call their service now, the new PlayStation Plus service. You have that,
Yeah.
And of course, it's not going to really meet the same level as what Game Pass is providing right now. But what was being marketed about Game Pass and what Game Pass currently offers right now, we're going into the rest of this year without any true first-party exclusives, when it sounds like maybe PlayStation might be able to swoop in and maybe capitalize on that. Maybe they'll make some type of change to their platform to offer those games in there instead. What do you think about that potential, and what does that do for Microsoft going through the rest of the year?
I don't think they need to be threatened. Even though that, I was going to say, PlayStation's offering, it's not as good, but in an aspect it is as good. I mean, you have a larger offering potentially. But it's more classic games, and you are subjected to streaming some of those titles.
Yeah.
And a lot of the modern titles aren't nearly as, they don't have nearly as many AAA titles on there, and they don't have new releases on there like Microsoft has. Yeah, they may not have the first party titles that they're throwing out, but this means that we have the potential of getting 2 first party titles for sure, next year. So on top of whatever else they have planned. Xbox has bought how many studios in the last 2 years? So
Yeah.
I have a feeling we're building up to a point that we could potentially see at least a major Xbox title, maybe not every quarter, but every half year,
No,
and maybe, so like 2 a year, more than just one.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, that could be the case. The only reason I was bringing it up is because that's definitely something that is a little bit of a concern. Granted, I've got to fully admit, I am subscribed to Game Pass, like the full on Ultimate, so I can get stuff on my Series X, I can get stuff on my PC, and I can do cloud streaming on my phone. But as
Same.
you've seen, Kyle, though, it's like lately my big game that's been pulling me in has just been Halo Infinite, at least from the Game Pass side of things. I've got Art of Rally, I've got Project Wingman, and I've played some other stuff through Game Pass as well, though, too.
Right.
So I have to fully admit, I'm not taking advantage of it as much as I probably should be, and that's my own fault, just because I get locked into the things that I know and like a lot of. It's like,
See, and I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah.
But it's nice to be able to have that offering.
Yeah. Exactly. No, exactly. That's one of those things too, especially in a household where I have several kids who are of the age that do like some of these other things that do come out on Game Pass. I don't have to, like, I do have achievements now, of course, for a Paw Patrol game in Game Pass, thanks to my daughter, of course, trying that out. But hey, you know what? Whatever. She got to try something, and I didn't have to go pay $40 for a game just for her to try it out and just for her to say, So that's fine with me. But that's exactly, I think, where you hit it, though, is that it is nice to have them there, knowing that I can go and pick those things up and go and try them out. I do really need to put more emphasis in playing things on Game Pass and put more effort out there to actually get through them all. But you are right. The nicety of being able to know that these big titles are available to us and help to make it so that way it's like I know that by owning Game Pass, by subscribing to it, I'm going to get this crazy, ridiculous amount of value out of it instead of going and paying $60 for a game. But then it comes back to the contradictory part. It's like, well, I've already paid enough to pay off Halo Infinite. Why haven't I just bought Halo Infinite, the actual full game itself, instead of paying for Game Pass more and more? But it's everything else baked into it, though, too, that I also use.
Yeah, and it's all those new titles that they add on Game Pass too. It's the fact that I don't have to go and spend $60 on a title, or $70 for God's sakes, if I had a PS5 and wanted to buy it on PlayStation. Um, if it's on, Game Pass, I can try it for free, and if I hate it, then I didn't waste 60 or $70. Because there have been a few that I've been curious about and I've tried, and they weren't that great of games, or for that matter, they were really short. So it's a good thing I didn't go out and spend the money on them.
Yeah, and it's like there are titles that I've played through Game Pass that I want to actually go put money down on. Like I have to admit too is I need to go put some more time into playing something like Flight Simulator because I've got the flight yoke, I've got the throttle control, and I need to go flying around a little bit more. But with like Flight Simulator and Halo Infinite and that, those are games that I would actually go put the full money down for as a part of like what I've been able to try in Game Pass. So I always have them available. Needless to say though, it is with stuff like this. Like, it helps to be able to jump into some of the latest and greatest things without dropping what's now really the new price tag, the $70 price tag for some of these new next-gen games. Like for us, like, we hopped into Forza the same day it launched with Forza Horizon 5. We launched into Halo Infinite the same day to go and play multiplayer on there. I've tried out
I've
Art
been
of
playing
Rally
Trek to Yomi since day one,
Yeah.
Shoot, I installed Yakuza Like a Dragon on my PC, so I can pick up where I was playing on my Xbox because the save is on the cloud, and I'm just playing the Game Pass version of the PC version of it.
Bingo, exactly.
I own the Xbox One, like, physical copy of Yakuza, but I'm still playing just the Game Pass version, so I can play it on my PC and get the higher res, better frame rate.
Yeah, and that's partially with me as well too. It's not to say that my Series X is a slouch in any way, shape, or form, but there is something about a few of those games that playing with a keyboard and mouse versus a controller definitely feel better, and then vice versa. There are things that feel better with a controller than they do keyboard and mouse. So, but even so, going back into a lot of this stuff though, is that it is nice for those to have those games out there, even if you're not using every single game out there, because not everything on Game Pass is going to appeal, but. It is.
Did you really think Starfield was going to come out this year, guys? Come on.
I actually, I will admit, I did actually have hopes for it to come out this year because I haven't really found a good RPG style like game like that. Like
if it beats out if it beats Star Citizen to the shelf, then there's no problem.
That's also fair. No, I was kind of hopeful because I like the sci-fi series, like genres more than anything when it comes to games. I don't have a problem with Elder Scrolls. I don't have a problem with Fallout. I've played enough of both, but there was just something about this that I thought was just bringing me in, and that's just the marketing hype probably just getting to me too. So I was kind of hopeful, but it doesn't mean that I don't have anything else to play. I've already admitted to it. I need to queue some more, like spend some more time on Game Pass playing some more stuff, probably put some more stuff on the Series X to play and check out though too. But it is interesting though that maybe PlayStation could sweep in though, and even if they don't go and modify their service, even if they don't go modify their service, maybe there's something can swoop in with to, I don't know, maybe start bringing some more people in from Game Pass. But where I find even some counterintuitiveness when it comes with that though too, some counterproductive parts of it is that I think it was earlier this week, Sony announced that they are still going to be having problems sourcing PlayStation 5s out there for people to purchase going through next year too. Even though we've seen Series S and X's on the shelves pretty well for, like, I would say the last couple months, it's been no problem finding one. So,
well, and as we discussed, about a month and a half ago, they're trying to get people to make PlayStation 4s in order to get them to produce PS5s. Just to entice them to produce the more expensive system. So
yeah, and with the ongoing rumors of like a PlayStation 5 Pro and of course the reworks of the Series S and X that are coming up supposedly over the next couple of years, who knows anymore? That's what I was saying. It's like maybe PlayStation could swoop in and maybe lure some people away from Game Pass, but at the same time they can't get enough PlayStation 5s out, so it is kind of contradictory to say stuff like that. But anyway, even so, it does feel weird going into 2022 knowing that there's no main first-party release from a Microsoft studio that, is going to be coming out. But
even though they own half the gaming industry now.
And soon will own Activision Blizzard if everything still goes through. But But even with all that said, though, is that there are still titles to play. There is still stuff to do. There are still games to play. There are still things that are absorbing a lot of our time. So it may not necessarily be as bad. It's disappointing on that part. But because of all the different acquisitions and really trying to get that groove of getting things out there, maybe Phil Spencer's promise of a new first-party game every quarter was definitely very optimistic. But that was made before we got into a global pandemic. And now here we are, hopefully seeing maybe 2023 being the year that we start to actually see more emphasis on that. So, but anyway, let's carry on here to another interesting story. Not necessarily sad, confusing, and frustrating, though. Let's put it that way. Activision Blizzard has announced what they are calling a character diversity tool. So on the 12th, Activision Blizzard announced that they have an internal tool they created called the Diversity Space Tool. The explanation here from King, so King being the mobile game company that Activision owns, so, ABK. It was developed by King and MIT Game Labs. It's their King's globalization project manager, Jacqueline Chomadas, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, apologize for butchering any names here, explain the tool's mission, stating, and this is from GameSpot, the Diversity Space Tool is a measurement device to help identify how diverse a set of character traits are, and in turn, how diverse the character and cast are when compared to the quote-unquote norm. So here, actually, I'll bring up the image from GameSpot that they were actually able to get from the tool. I don't know if they saw the tool or if this was provided as a part of maybe the blog post that Activision Blizzard put up. But this tool here is actually measuring out the traits and diversity as it relates to support characters from Overwatch. So the list includes Ana, Brigitte, Lucio, Mercy, Moira, Zenyatta, and it's measuring them on their on all those different things as it relates to diversity. And of course, you can see it's talking about some of these different things here. So if I bring up the little graph, it's talking about culture, race, age, cognitive ability, physical ability, body type, facial features and beauty, gender identity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic background. So they announced this
seems
here.
Super gray.
They did, yeah, because like the article goes on to say here the rest of this again. The article from GameSpot says, apparently the Call of Duty Vanguard and Overwatch 2 dev teams beta tested the tool and thought it was helpful. The reception was immediate and enthusiastic, again in quotes, and Activision Blizzard plans to launch this tool internally during the summer and Q3. And, of course, just like anything else, because Activision Blizzard is currently embroiled in a lot of things that, are kind of on the negative side when it comes to how you handle diversity, they have definitely received a lot of flack, a lot of fire, and a lot of hate for even coming up with anything like this whatsoever. There's a lot of people that are frustrated about this. And I got a tweet right here from user Kaiser Beams over on Twitter saying, Activision Blizzard King determining if the new Overwatch 2 character is sufficiently diverse enough for people to stop yelling at them about their CEO's numerous sex crimes. And it has a picture of Mr. Burns measuring the head of a statue or some type here. So it's interesting. It's kind of funny because it reminds me of, or as much as people try to strive for diversity when it comes to making sure that they have a good balance of representing the world as a whole when it comes to making games, instead of your generic superhero, male, female, your villain, male, female, just and your generic tropes, they try, but then they sometimes go so far as to even alienate more because they're trying to figure out, it's like, what's a baseline that we work from and how do we go from there? And
yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like
bad.
This tool definitely feels like it would be used in a way that it could create characters that would alienate certain groups of people and maybe, cause so much diversity that it would be harmful.
Yeah, it's like it's more like it's a game like
I'm trying to be real careful here because this seems super gray.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there. It's that's what I was saying. It's like you've got to represent the world that your game like thrives in. Like, so Overwatch, for an example, is that the characters are from all over the world and have all different types of backgrounds. You know, we didn't even know that Tracer, like as an example, was identified as LGBT until there was that comic that came out. And it's like, okay, that caused a stir for some people, but okay, it's just another part of her story. That's what we've got. And that's just one character just to make an example of, you know, anyway. Or maybe that it's, I think that, you know, Torbjorn's daughter, of course, is Brigitte. And I don't think there's ever been a mention of her mom. So maybe Torbjorn is like a single dad or something. You know, I think her mom was mentioned maybe in some comics, but you don't really see much more talk of her anyway, though. So maybe it's like, okay, well, now you got the single dad trope kind of going on here anyway, too. But
do we really need to get that in depth?
No.
Yeah, I think you're right.
No, I'm just saying
it causes more alienation.
No, I'm not arguing on that part. I'm countering that part though. Is that it's not that. Is that it's like, you know, they're trying to build a universe and explain some of these people and trying to explain some of these backgrounds and stories and who these characters are. Just because we have invested a lot of time in them. I mean, hell, I'm wearing my Lucio hoodie right now because that's like my favorite character in Overwatch. Okay, him and Zenyatta, but it's one of those things that they've done such a good job in making this very diverse and colorful world in Overwatch and bringing people together from all over the world within it to create this one unified force. And it's awesome, okay? Don't get me wrong in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But it feels like a lot of that kind of ends up getting thrown to the wind when it's like, okay, you guys did a great job doing this, but now we're going to go ahead and shop this tool to you guys to allow you to do even better. And it ends up becoming more of a, where do we set the baseline at for a lot of this? And then how do we go from there to identify a lot of these things? And it's weird because you have to create a baseline. That just seems gross in of itself. So, I mean, again, like a lot of people are really frustrated about this and really confused as to why any type of tool like this would exist or is even necessary. Maybe for some other Activision titles, sure, but Blizzard stuff seems to had been pretty well diverse for a long while, especially. So it seems very weird on this. But before I get into the response that Activision Blizzard actually put up in their news post for this, though, do you have any thoughts about what I was saying there, Kyle? I mean, anything else to add there about this or any other ideas on it?
I don't know. I still kind of hold that it's so gray. I feel like, especially sharing that they've made a tool like this, it's like, I don't know. It's like we want to make a more inclusive game, but we want to make these characters by using this tool, we're going to start generating characters that could potentially be more racist or, you know, point to, you know, more of a negative socioeconomic background of a character. It like, I don't know. It just puts things in a negative light, I think.
Right. I mean, you're going to have characters who came up from being nothing into something.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's with any game, but...
No, I agree. You're going to have a lot of that, but I think when you put, like, labels on it like that, yeah, especially beauty, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, you know, when you're starting to put some of those labels on, maybe that's where some of it becomes weird instead of just being just flat out, like, straight out identifying is that it's like this character grew up poor, this character... identifies as LGBTQ, you know, there's
right.
that type of stuff.
It's like,
instead of just being straight to the point and you have to go through stuff like this.
It's almost like someone took all this stuff and they put it on a twister spinner and then they just started flicking the thing and they were like, check it out, guys, we can generate this stuff randomly.
No kidding. So that's how some of it feels like. It reminds me of the joke boards that the joke like spinner boards that people will put up that have like a key on it and it's not held up there very well, where they'll spin it, but the key always points to the bottom just because of the weight. And at the bottom is like just the choice that always gets picked. And usually it says like, you know, it's like a dad at home. It's like, what am I doing today? You know, he flips, it's like, oh, I guess I'm sitting down drinking beer. You know, it's that's like what it was that they spun. It's like they spun it. It's like, oh, I guess we're creating a diversity tool here. But I want to take from there, and I want to read kind of what Activision Blizzard put out here in their blog post as a follow-up to all the controversy with this thing getting out. This isn't going to be, well, I'll pretty much probably read everything here, but it says the objective of the tool is to uncover unconscious bias by identifying existing norms in representation and acknowledging opportunities for growth and inclusion. It is not a substitute for any other essential efforts by our teams in this regard, nor will it alter our company's diversity hiring goals. Over the past several years, the development of the tool was done with the support of all our employee DE&I networks, so diversity, equity, or equality and inclusion networks, and we collaborated with external partners to create an even more robust tool. The tool isn't meant to be used in isolation. Teams would sit down with company DE&I staff to identify existing norms and then discuss, educate, consult, and collaborate on how a character's representation is expressed beyond those norms. This process is intended to create a conversation where our developers, assisted by the tool, challenge assumptions, assess choices, and find opportunities for authentic representation to be fostered in our games. Activision Blizzard is committed to reflecting the diversity of its millions of players around the world through representation and inclusion in its games as well as its employees. Our intent with this blog entry was to share an in-progress piece of our journey in this endeavor. We recognize and respect that all people may be on their own unique point in their journey with DE&I. The Diversity Space Tool is not a definitive evaluation of diversity in game content. Rather, it is a bridge in opening previously unspoken conversations into how thoughtful inclusion can happen and thrive in games. Again,
well, obviously Bobby Kotick's never sat in one of these meetings.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Kyle. You're not wrong, but some things best left unsaid because everybody knows that one. But
because I mean, they said they've been using it for a while. Obviously, he's never sat in one of these meetings. But go ahead.
No. All I was going to say is that it's like what I had just said before getting into this part is that Blizzard has had a very, very good, rich history when it comes to diversity in their games itself. You know, it doesn't feel like it's been anything that's been pushy. It doesn't feel like it's been anything that's been, that's been too biased towards one race or another in any way, shape, or form. It feels like the inclusion and diversity has been done well. It doesn't mean to say that they've done it perfectly, because obviously there are things that can always be tweaked over time. And, you know, as things are learned, as things evolve, as things grow, because that's just what happens in our world. Things don't ever always just stay the same. Things evolve and things change. And you want to make sure that I hate to use the word capitalize on these changes, but you want to make sure that you are reacting to these changes so that way you are making your best effort and putting your best foot forward to be as inclusive as you can. By making a tool like this, though, it feels like they still don't get it, and it still feels like they are putting out like all this extra work for things that seem to already be kind of going in a good direction in the first place. This seems like just a weird speed bump or hurdle, especially again with trying to identify what this baseline is. Like, where are they getting this data for that baseline?
Yeah, the fact that they have to, establish a baseline, that's weird in of itself. But, the whole thing that they have to have tools and meetings to discuss it, like, are these just like the people working on the characters like totally socially inept? They don't understand how people actually act or should treat one another, and that they need to be educated on how characters should act, to feel like real people.
Exactly. That's really what I'm getting at with a lot of this stuff, is that it feels like
it's weird.
Yeah, it feels like that's what's happening, is that they're just it feels like they're just missing the entire point of it all. Is what it's coming down to. What I'm hoping for, though, and this is as a person who works in development, this is as a person who works in IT and that type of thing, this is a person who uses, like, I use GitHub, of course, a lot, is I'm hoping that, of course, with the tool having been developed in conjunction with MIT, that they open source it. And that they open source it in a way that allows us to figure out, or at least allows researchers to see, how they came up with that baseline. because obviously you can add in all these different metrics, all these different parameters and whatnot to say, okay, well, this is how we're going to go beyond that baseline. But what does the baseline values actually look like? And it shouldn't be anything that's really proprietary in that sense. Like, I can't imagine it being anything like that, but it feels like if this tool is so far successful with the internal teams over there at Activision Blizzard, then why not make it go out there so that way it's something accessible for everyone at least to review and observe? Because if you want that diversity, equality, and inclusion on your teams and in your games, then it's going to need it's going to at least need input from other external parties besides what has already been listed so far, like including the community itself, to really kind of look at this and understand it. That's just me, though, from a developer kind of like just code reviewer standpoint, though. So I don't know, just, God, another weird thing out of Activision Blizzard.
Agree.
It is, though, right? It's another weird thing out of Activision Blizzard, though, right?
Yeah, it totally.
Oh, God. All right. Well, I guess let's move on here, Kyle, because, I mean, at least someone seems to have their head together when we talk about this next one here, and that is Nintendo. I mean, you would think the company here that seems to continuously just, they keep making money by selling the same console for as long as they have and re-releasing the same game that they have for 50 to 100% markup than it was when it originally launched. They might have their head in the right place. Article here from Video Games Chronicle talks about Nintendo saying the transition to its next console is a major focus for us. So where this comes from is actually in an investor Q&A that was in Japan, and then Video Games Chronicle translated it. They are, to summarize this, is that Nintendo is trying to figure out exactly how to handle and how to truly focus on how to transition their player base that they have now for the what is it? I think 100 million. Yeah, right there. 100 million plus Switch owners out there, and how to transition them to the next generation hardware that comes out. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're trying to figure out. Like what it says here is Nintendo president Shintaro Furukawa. He said that the company planned to alleviate the risks of resetting its 100 million plus user base by building long-term relationships with its users, partly via Nintendo accounts and by using its IP outside of gaming. And he goes on to say here, we have already announced a portion of our software roadmap releasing up to next spring. Unlike the past, we continue to have a large variety of games scheduled to be released even beyond 5 years of release. This is because the Nintendo Switch has had such a smooth launch, allowing us to focus all of our development resources on a single platform. However, the question of whether we will be able to just as smoothly transition from the Nintendo Switch to the next generation of hardware is a major focus for us. Based on our experiences with the Wii, Nintendo DS, and other hardware, it is very clear that one of the major obstacles is how to easily transition from one hardware to the next. And that's a big issue that, as much as we talk about Microsoft on this stuff, they really hit the nail in the head on how they continue that longevity with their player base. How the Xbox One stuff transitioned over to the Xbox Series line, and how it's transitioned over with all these different things in Game Pass too, and the game streaming stuff and backwards compatibility. They kind of hit the nail on the head, whereas like I made the joke there at the beginning with Nintendo, and Nintendo reselling us the same game from several console generations ago with the 100% markup,
Right.
What do you think about Nintendo's comments on that? What do you think about Nintendo's president making comments like that?
Well, we've already seen the first steps of it happen. Nintendo's been a little bit behind the trend, of course, with the online especially. But now that they've established, or I shouldn't say established, are establishing a new user account system that's better for the users in order to be able to transfer their Switch games from one console to another and keep track of their games. They kind of had it going with the new I don't want to call it Club Nintendo because I don't think that's what they were calling it anymore. After the DS era.
Yeah, they called it something else now, but I remember.
Yeah, I mean, when they transferred from Club Nintendo, they were trying to enact it a little bit, but now that we've actually seen the profiles go into full effect, I think we're slowly working into this ability to be able to maybe potentially transfer some of our games. Nintendo's one that they don't necessarily like to back off the fact that they've sold you games. I mean, you look at the Game Boy Advance with the GameCube, or even the Game Boy Advance being able to play original Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, and then the original DS and DS Lite being able to play Game Boy Advance games. So I feel like, in a next generation console, there's a lot of potential for us to see a good majority of the titles that you purchased on the eShop potentially transfer, as well as, maybe they'll establish an official achievement system. I mean, we've seen it with a few games already, Luigi's Mansion being one of the first to do an achievement system. But we're slowly working there, and they're slowly implementing the profile pictures, and we're getting there. But I think we're still a ways off. But it's the first steps of being able to establish, the continuation of users onto the next console, like they used to do with the handhelds.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, especially given that, I mean, you make a great comment about that, is that we did have those consoles that did go hand in hand. And really, with the birth of the Switch, it really did signal the death of their regular handheld line. And now we don't really have a transitionary platform like that anymore, that allows for that sort of thing to progress forward, because whatever Nintendo could potentially do next, whatever we'll just say Switch 2.0 is what it could potentially be. We don't have a real good way of at least continuing on with DS and 3DS games. There's no next console to take any of that stuff to. The Switch itself has been going on for as long as it has. And so we don't have that transitionary point to be able to bring all of that stuff together, other than by creating new accounts and rebuying games that we may already have, another copy of already from years past. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle some of that transitionary work, given that we don't have a jumping point. We don't have a bridge in between when it comes to that stuff, unless they somehow merge everything together.
Right.
Unless they somehow say, we're going to take the next generation dock and we're going to slap a 3DS and DS cartridge port into the side of the thing, so that way you can plug it in. You can do DS and 3DS games on your Switch 2.0, no problem.
Or if they just did a dock that could play all my handheld Nintendo games, that'd be pretty cool.
You're asking for a lot, but I got to tell you, with the way that we've seen retro consoles come out, I wouldn't be shocked to see something like that at some point too.
Right.
So I wouldn't really be shocked either. But yeah, because there is nothing transitionary wise, Nintendo really has to have their focus in the right spot, that all of this stuff is going to be able to carry over to the next one without that, like the president said there, like Furukawa, excuse me. Like he said there, is that, they don't want to have to do a reset and have all their players, flip things around, because the Switch has done very well and continues to do very well. So
it might be it's verging on Nintendo's best-selling console of all time, and it's looking at setting all new records for Nintendo. So why would they want to kill that user base?
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, there's actually something recently too that says that it's actually right here. So when they were talking about all of this stuff with investors, because they were doing all their things here for their quarterly reports, or it might have been yearly reports, they said on Tuesday, Nintendo announced Switch hardware sales of 23.06 million for its fiscal year ending in March 2022, bringing lifetime sales to 107.6 million. This figure brings the company closer to beating PlayStation 2's record at 155 million, but it still represents a 20% decline on the previous year, when Switch sales peaked at 28.83 million units. So they are getting close to hitting the PlayStation 2's all-time record for selling, and I believe they've also beaten PlayStation 4. And I saw
but they're
that
also
in another
selling
story.
faster than PS2.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is that compared to like PlayStation 4, with everything that's been going on anyway lately too, with the supply chain issues, and even with PlayStation 5 as it relates to supply chain issues, well, really more PlayStation 4 because they shut down manufacturing of that. Now it's in such an interesting place that it's like Switches can get out much faster. It seems like they're able just to get out there and people can get them with relative ease. And
Well, and you also got to
yeah,
figure the PlayStation 2 had like a 15-year lifespan. They were still producing PlayStation 2
true.
games alongside PS3 for many, many years.
No, and that's also true. And that's why I think about even some of it is, it's like, could the Switch hold on to some of that stuff as well? And I don't know if it can, because technology is evolving so quick anyway, and they're kind of behind a little bit when it comes to sort of like some of these other high, like, in regards to like visual fidelity and that, games, obviously I don't expect Nintendo to embrace ray tracing anytime soon. But of course, a lot of people are asking for at least like, 2K, 4K graphics in those games. Forget ray tracing, just offer 4K at 60, and you're going to probably make quite a few people happy. But for them right now, for Nintendo really, is that they still feel like they're in the middle of their life cycle with the Switch. The OLED model only came out last year, last October, actually. So we've got some time to see what could potentially come around the pipeline. But yeah, they've got a lot of stuff to do to make sure that they don't really screw over their player base and make people have to start over again. That's a big, big thing they have to really focus on, because right now, especially with the sales decline in the Nintendo Switch, it's kind of like that same thing with like Netflix when they had the big decline in subscribers for the first time ever. It's because everybody who has a Netflix account or it's like everybody that wants a Netflix account has a Netflix account. That's it. That's what it is. It's kind of the same thing. Maybe we're going to the Switch now. Everybody who wants a Switch has one. It's just an interesting thought into all of it. That's really it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still see the next Switch being an adaptive cartridge console. So it'll probably accept 2 different varieties of cartridge, including original Switch games, because they don't want to get rid of that user base or pass on, after such a successful life cycle of a system.
Yeah, and it would be nice to actually see them maybe put into the next, like whatever the Switch 2.0 could be, or whatever their next hardware is going to be, that it has dual ports on it, that you could put a Switch game in one and Switch 2.0 game in the other, and have the 2 games with you and boot them at any point in time. So you could switch between the two, kind of like on the fly. But that's just a pipe dream, just one can hope a little bit.
Maybe not.
Yeah, let's move on here to our next story and talk about this one real quick too. This will probably be a fast one, is that EA and FIFA have split. So basically, easy to say here is that FIFA has decided not to renew their license, and with Electronic Arts, with EA, and will now be moving on to make their own FIFA titles instead of relying on EA to put them out. And it's funny because EA only just released in the last few months FIFA 23. However, it doesn't mean that EA is out of the soccer/football games at all. They will be making their own brand new EA series related to football, and that called EA Sports FC. And it sounds like this is going to be a lot of the same thing that we already see going forward with all the other sports licensing games or licensed sports games, that we see out of EA. Kyle, I mean, really quick, there maybe isn't too much crazy to say. This could have probably been one of those quest markers bits that we talk about at the very end. But I mean, what do you think about that, though, with EA and FIFA kind of splitting? I mean, that's a pretty big split, especially because FIFA made EA a lot of money in the last couple years.
Oh, yeah. And, part of me wonders if, this has to do with the fact that EA had expressed interest in wanting to rebrand the FIFA license before, the split had actually occurred to being Football Club. But maybe not. I don't know who it's actually going to hurt worse, in all honesty. FIFA is losing a strong developer, regardless of, how much flack EA may get over producing the same title year over year and not making many changes. The fact of the matter is it was still a solid title, and FIFA was actually one of the more major selling sports titles. Maybe not here in the U.S., but in other countries, it obviously sold better than Madden. So for them to lose that, obviously EA is losing a lot of revenue, but FIFA is also losing a developer. So FIFA needs to shop out a developer, and where they're going to find, someone with the tenure and know-how of producing that sort of sports game with that level, it might be a stretch before we see an actual good FIFA title come from the FIFA franchise again.
Yeah, because
for a few years.
Yeah, because even though the license is severed with between FIFA and EA, the whole thing though is that it's not like because the license is severed that EA is just going to hand over all these things to them and say, okay, well there you go, now you can do your own thing. No, it's because EA's got all the proprietary tech there. They just had the license to make the games, and that was it. So now for FIFA to go and shop around to these other devs to make the game now instead, and of course talk about in the article, it also makes mention of the metaverse because that's still the latest buzzword. There's it's like, is there another company out there besides maybe like 2K who does their own sports games anyway that could potentially provide the same, I guess, quality? Because they even go on to say here in the article's from the Associated Press, and the one mention here is that, let's see, where was it? When EA did their end of year financial review, they had made $1.623 billion in 2021 from the Ultimate Team mode in FIFA, where customers can buy extra content in EA Sports games. $1.623 billion is not something to balk at least when it comes to, all the other stuff they make for the pay-to-play type thing when, you can add on all that additional content. So,
well, and you got to think about all the revenue that EA has generated for players and the FIFA license. So just off of that Ultimate Team, not to mention titles sold over the course of the year.
Agreed. It is definitely, and if that is FIFA alone, I mean, geez, that's a lot. And I think FIFA actually even sells more than Madden throughout the year anyway. So yeah, for them to transition to their own game it's going to be an interesting thing for both sides, because one, FIFA, I don't think they're going to find a partner who's going to be able to make something like what EA Sports has been able to do. While at the same time, I think EA Sports being able to make their own soccer game, the problem they're going to run into is licensing the actual teams and other players, to make for those games too, because a lot of that is tied up into the FIFA organization. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and whether or not that actually still allows them to make the same amount of money that they have been, though, too. But I'm not a sports game player. I'll just go back to playing Halo Infinite.
Yeah, it makes me really curious to how EA is going to continue their licensing with Football Club. Will everything just be generic football clubs? We won't see Arsenal, we won't see Barcelona, we won't see any of these, actual clubs. It's just going to be, England, Germany, US, it's possible, and we may not see any other player or any actual player names in the EA license title until, something can be resolved as far as it goes. And who knows, maybe FIFA will potentially one day rejoin EA, seeing that, they did lose all that revenue off of the Ultimate Team, being as it, was the highest generating sports title as far as like extras that you could buy.
So. No, that's exactly it. That's no kidding there. All right. Well, I guess good luck to you, FIFA, and being able to make whatever it is you're going to do with your own game now. And maybe they'll release something that's like 16-bit, and it's like they'll release a Super Nintendo cartridge for it because they forgot what generation we're in on consoles and that. Who knows?
Maybe they could make a Mutant League.
They'll release a game called FIFA, but it'll be foosball instead. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
There we go. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on here to our next story. And this is actually kind of like, part of me is kind of like a little happy with this one. Part of this is not really, but Gotham Knights, it's been announced that they will no longer be releasing Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions of the next upcoming game in the Batman universe. So Gotham Knights is a game, of course, that has you playing as Red Hood, Nightwing, Robin, and Batgirl, and it's kind of a Arkham Asylum, Arkham City meets beat 'em up by going, of course, with the sidekicks of Batman, because Batman is supposedly dead in this game now too. The game itself, is it's one of those that is being released on a litany of devices, whether it is, at least it was at that point in time when it was announced, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series line, PlayStation 5, PC. I think there might be a version for the Switch that's coming out too. Oh no, it looks like they didn't announce that there was a one for the Switch, but at least it's going to be like out there on a lot of them. However, now October 25th is when the game is releasing, and they've decided to axe the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions. Kyle, we've been kind of like looking at a lot of this for a while, especially after all the fallout of Cyberpunk going to the last generation consoles. What do you think about this title?
Especially it being a multiplayer title and the things that they're trying to achieve in the title as far as graphics, there is no possible way it could have been on the Xbox One or the PS4. Maybe the PS4 Pro or the Series or the Xbox One X, but even that would have been a pretty hefty stretch. Just looking at, I think we're at a point where the developers are trying to achieve a stable game that runs on the now current gen consoles. And that's where we should really be at. So it's not a negative thing for them to not be producing the Xbox One or PS4 version. And that being said, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to stream it on an Xbox One, because you could still stream it as an Xbox, cloud game.
Yeah, if it does make its way to that, then I mean, at least it becomes available for those consoles. But now it's not a physical release for it, because, like you said, by releasing it, say like if they made it for the Xbox One X, that's great. But the Xbox One line is kind of like agnostic in that sense, where sure, the Xbox One X has way more power and way more capability than the Xbox One does, but they're all really the same platform. If you strip away those little bits, they really are still. So it's tough for them to focus that way.
They're doing gamers a disservice if they're not focusing on the current gen consoles at this point, because if you're just trying to be inclusive, then you're not pushing the limit. And a lot of the people that are playing titles day one that are going to make the difference for your sales are the people on the bleeding edge.
Yeah, and that's where it's going to be a big thing for them to continue to focus on, because the fact that it's coming out on PC anyway, like it says here in the article from IGN that it's going to be coming out via Steam and Epic Games Store. PCs are all different types of like configurations and that. So you're going to have some that have the same specs as like an Xbox One. You're going to have some that have the same specs as the Series X. You're going to have some that even blow that stuff away. And so that game's going to have to work across a whole slew of things. But for the people who only own consoles, exactly, you want to aim for that current generation of consoles and do your best to
where it's the most stable.
Exactly, and potentially not alienate your customer base. Because at the end of the day, do you really want to put out the resources on supporting a game that, a game that's released for last generation consoles when it's already been shown since the new ones have come out that it's harder to handle development for all of these different platforms and not fail on one side while succeed on the other? The option for the cloud streaming part makes a great use case for something like this.
Right. And realistically, at this point, metrics are coming out with new release titles, and we're seeing more and more that, 80% of the people, if it's released on all four consoles, or I should say all five if you include the Switch, the majority of players that are playing on Xbox and PlayStation, 80% are going to PS5 and Series systems. So it means that people are actually getting the consoles. People are making the jump. They're trying to do what it takes to get out there and, get the next gen systems. So why would you cater to the 20% when you can get the profit off the people that are spending the money on the big consoles that are the new ones?
Yeah, and if the route you need to go is to release on the current generation consoles instead of the last gen ones, but start to work out that streaming ability where they can play those games through the cloud streaming, but can't go out and buy one of the new Xboxes, can at least still enjoy the game. If that's the way they want to go, that is at least not necessarily doing a disservice to customers. It does kind of put them in a weird spot because they have to wait a little while longer, but at least it helps to open up the game still to more people, especially as the fact that Gotham Knights is being marketed as a co-op game too. So you want to be able to have more people playing it, together. At least that would be the hope. But there's been no announcement about this game coming out on Game Pass anyway. And while that doesn't mean that by it coming to Game Pass, it's going to go to cloud streaming, that's not how it necessarily works. It could just be one of those things, just like Fortnite did last week, that goes to cloud streaming just, on its own. I don't know.
This is true. And honestly, if I'm not mistaken, I had heard a rumor in the wind that WB Studio is shopping themselves out to be purchased. So, who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I know that there was talk about a lot of that too, and I think Microsoft, if you're going to buy anybody else right now, I mean, WB Games isn't necessarily like the worst idea in the world, but get through the Activision Blizzard stuff first before you try to go do anything like that, please. Please.
Yeah, no doubt.
Or no, maybe we'll see it as the weird one where Nintendo swoops in and picks them up. I don't know.
That'd be weird.
You're telling me. But anyway, we're at the point in our news live stream now. We're reaching the end, of course, and that's where we hit our segment, the quest markers, where these are the stories that have come out over the week, of course, that are just easy enough to talk about, just quick fire ones here. And then, of course, we'll wrap things up for today's news roundup. So, Kyle, go ahead and hop into that list first. What do we have up in our first quest marker for the day?
Yeah, so first quest marker, leaked images of the new Silent Hill show it may be British focused. Known leaker, and let me actually grab that because Dusk Golem. He's actually leaked stuff in the past that turned out to be true, had leaked out some images that have been getting the copyright strike all over, or copyright claim all over the net. So it may be entirely accurate that this new Silent Hill that potentially could be coming out is actually British focused. Not a negative thing, but we're getting a new Silent Hill potentially. Could be some really awesome news. So that's something to watch out for.
Yeah, that'd be cool to see, especially after the Silent Hills game between Guillermo Guillermo
del Toro
and what is it, Hideo Kojima? They were working that one, I think. Yeah. So that'd be cool to see what this next one can be. But what else we got?
And then, of course, in 6 days, if you're listening live, and actually, if you're not listening live, it will be on the 20th of May. Kirby 64 is getting released on the Nintendo Expansion Pass. So if you haven't had a chance to check out some good old Kirby 64, now is your chance. Great game. I love Kirby games.
Yeah, and I think Kirby 64, it's Kirby's got, it had a really good release there with what came out on the Switch there just recently too. I think though that this is a good place to start adding more Kirby games too, because Kirby games are just all kinds of fun anyway in the first place. So putting this into the expansion pass is probably a good idea too.
Right. And I mean, it gives people the chance to experience classic side scroller Kirby. I mean, this is the generation where they really wanted to go 3D, but they couldn't quite do it just because of the console capabilities. So it does have some 2.5D sections. But other than that, it is mostly just the side-scroller action, but still, great Kirby game.
Absolutely.
Continuing on, though, we got WB Multiverse heads into the closed alpha from May 19th to the 27th.
Remember, that's multiverses.
Oh, Multiverses, excuse me. That's the WB game that's supposed to include like the Batman series, basically Super Smash Brothers, but WB characters. And you actually got an invite to the alpha, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how because I don't own any WB like games. I mean, I have like some of the Arkham games though, but those were picked up through different platforms. So this requires you to have a WB Games account to be able to sign up for it. But yes, I have an invite in my inbox that I'll probably go fill in, and I'll go check out this. I'll go check this out. But yeah, this is WB Games fighter game. You know, it's their attempt to try to do the same thing that Nintendo did with, or not Nintendo. Well, I guess, yeah, Nintendo with Smash Brothers, but then Nickelodeon had their All-Star Battle Royale game too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know Nickelodeon All Stars, they just had some new characters launch, but I'm still kind of excited to see what is going to be with the WB game because the WB one just seems bonkers with the amount of characters and the amount of universes they're putting in together. So
Agreed. No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, what
um
else is there?
we got the Lord of the Rings Middle Earth, or actually the Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle Earth, was announced, being published by Electronic Arts and is going to be a mobile game, unfortunately.
Hooray.
Uh, in the same vein of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. So, I don't know if you can really expect a lot out of your next Lord of the Rings game. It's definitely not going to be a Two Towers, though, which saddens me.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the way a lot of stuff is going with mobile game development anyway, too, is licensing all this stuff anyway. You know, maybe it'll be
Yeah.
an okay one, maybe it won't. I mean, their Galaxy of Heroes game has actually been pretty successful though, too, for doing the Star Wars stuff. Now it's like, how is this one going to pan out, or is it going to be one that's more like trying to pander to the Lord of the Rings fans and just ends up being a flop?
Yeah, I feel like it'll be a Galaxy of Heroes clone that panders to the Lord of the Rings audience, basically.
Yeehaw.
Yeah,
Yeehaw.
no doubt.
And then we got one more, I think, on there. What is up
Two
with that
more,
one?
actually.
Oh, two more.
The next one's really exciting, though. Bioware may have accidentally revealed something about Mass Effect 4 in a post. It seems that some of the marketing department left a little piece of information in a product description, saying that Shepard's final quest may have ended the threat of the Reapers, but at great cost, including Earth itself, while Shepard and the survivors are left to pick up the pieces. Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of a whoops moment, I guess.
Yeah.
But
So,
it sounds like obviously Shep is coming back.
yep. And so to put it on there too, really quick, Kyle, is that the actual product description part there, that post is actually on the it was, excuse me, it's been changed since, but it's on the product page for the Mass Effect teaser poster that they put out earlier this year. The one that has what looks like like a smaller like Normandy like dropship or something. You see the people walking up to the Geth corpse or what have you. But if you zoom out farther, of course, it actually looks more like you're looking at a Geth silhouette. You know, overall.
Yeah, I believe that the
Yeah.
team members at BioWare were saying that there's no less than at least 5 hidden things in the poster.
True.
And of course, they give the description as
Yeah.
a Krogan and its 4-member team walking towards the Geth-shaped crater
Yeah.
with a ship that resembles the Normandy. Um,
But
I
that's
don't
the
know.
thing is
They
that,
gave away
yeah.
too much.
Right, but that teaser poster though is now being sold on the BioWare gear site, and that's the description on it though, which is just funny that it's like at the end of Mass Effect 3 when you make your decision there. Of course, we saw the little bit there that maybe Shepard could be alive, but maybe not. We're not really sure. And then of course the teaser for the next Mass Effect game came out, and it's where Liara found, of course, the N7 badge on the ground. We don't know if it actually is Shepard, part of Shepard, whatever. So maybe, who knows? But that's funny though that they decided to mess that part up though, and inadvertently potentially tell us that Commander Shepard is back and this is his favorite store on the Citadel.
Right? I was about to say it. Damn it. You beat me to it.
You're welcome, Kyle. Anyway, what do we got as our last one then?
And then in the last bit of exciting news, at least for me, Alan Wake has been picked up by AMC to produce a Alan Wake TV series, further expanding the Alan Wake potential Control universe. Who knows? We could maybe see Courtney Hope join the fray as Jesse Faden in a Control series later on down the line. I could only hope.
See, yeah, I mean, if it's all part of this connected universe and you want to really kind of merge and bring things together, I mean, they had somewhat of a success with the few things that they did with the Walking Dead series. So maybe they could start to kind of do that and have that ability to branch out where you have those different games that are still essentially in the same universe come together in some form or another.
Well, and you figure it's really blowing up now because they've got Alan Wake 2 announced. They've got Project Condor announced and in the works. That's the Control multiplayer experience.
Correct.
That's going to be a multiplayer exclusive experience. And then they also have the potential of Control 2 coming down the pipeline eventually. So I think they're really looking to expand on this franchise in major ways. Makes me excited.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very exciting for this itself. I mean, I've played a little bit of Control. I'm fully aware of Alan Wake. I just haven't played any of it, though, either. I know that, however, even with it, though, you're still very excited, and I can't actually wait to see it because after with what's been going on with the Halo series over on Paramount Plus, yeah, there needs to be some changes there, especially in the way that games are adapted into television. So that's just... We're not going to get into that right now. That's a discussion for another day.
Do we really want to say it?
No, I don't. I'm leaving it at that because people can go look it up themselves. But I think with that is it for our quest marker section for this, correct?
I think so.
Then, of course, with that section being done, that is actually it for this week's NPCs Weekly News Roundup. Again, it is May 14th, 2022. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this stream. Of course, we will have a follow-up podcast on this as well, too. So if you did happen to miss any of this and you want to listen to it while you're on the go, especially because, you know, YouTube has that problem where you try to watch a video, you lock the screen to hear the audio, and you can't do it anymore. Guess what? This will be in podcast form, too, potentially over on Monday. So you missed anything there, you can give us a listen to that as you're on the go. Go find out exactly what platforms we are on. You know what? I'll just tell you. We're on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're out there. But if you want to go find out, like, specifically what platforms we're on, you can go check out our homepage, anchor.fm/the-npcs-podcast. Even subscribe there as well, too. Helps us out, helps you out. It's all fun, especially as we continue to do what we do for almost 3 years now. And, of course, with that, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We will catch you all next week.
Bye-bye now.